Messages is a consultancy focusing on companies align their marketing and sales teams to be able to set up revenue operations and build their revenue engines. So today, I'm excited to moderate the next installment of our live forum series, which is all about signals in lead scoring. Before we get into that, I'll just kind of remind everyone this is really supposed to be an interactive live forum. So we're going to have a few slides just in the first few minutes. We're going to turn off the slides. If you feel comfortable, turn on your camera, because really we're going to look to have a conversation about lead scoring. We have a few experts that are joining us, and obviously there's going to be a number of other participants. And so I think that we'll kind of get started, and then we'll look to everyone to chime in. What are your questions? What are your challenges? What have you seen that's worked? What have you seen that hasn't worked? I would even encourage you start right now as we're kind of getting set up here. Type in the chat kind of where you're coming from today, and get ready to share. We're going to have a poll here in about a minute. All right, so with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about what the next 45 minutes is going to look like. So we'll start. We'll do a quick setup here, do some introductions, talk a little bit about a few topics related to signals in lead scoring, and then really we're going to look to open up the conversation, answer questions, and really do a deeper dive. Now on to our guest speakers. So in the left corner, we have Nadia Milani, VP of Marketing at Proposify. She is representing the marketing perspective for our forum today. She has a strong point of view on lead scoring, having worked across SaaS, e-commerce, and tech industries for a number of years now. Now, on the other side, in the right corner, we have the sales perspective represented by Jody Johnson, CEO of ProspectHunter, a teleprospecting demand generation company. So welcome both Nadia and Jody. So happy to have you here with us.
So good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you for having us.
Excellent. So I know we're all anxious to get the discussion going. We'll just spend maybe 15 seconds and cover some housekeeping items. So we'll ask, please stay muted when not speaking, so just to minimize the background noise. I would say please feel free to use Zoom emojis to react to what you're hearing, or use chat to share your thoughts, your feedback, your questions. If you feel comfortable, we'll ask you to come on and speak. That'd be awesome. If not, that's okay. Still, the chat is always there. If you're having any technical difficulties, please direct message Emily Paola. She is one of our fabulous administrators for this forum today, and we will share the slides and resources after the forum via email. So if you register to attend, we have your email, we will follow up. So you don't have to worry about it. Everything we share here will be available to you after. Okay. So with that said, let's jump in. Let's kick off our signals in lead scoring discussion. So let's start with, again, this is really, we want this to be interactive. Let's start with a quick poll. Let's hear from you. When you hear the word lead scoring, what words come to mind? Give it a thought. You can scan the QR code with your phone on the screen, or feel free. I believe there's a link in the chat. Oh, I see it. I don't know if it's clickable. Emily, can you add the HTTPS so we can make it clickable? Let me see, and I'm gonna participate here as well. No, there we go. Perfect. All right. So let me add.
So Hazy, I'll just encourage everybody, if you haven't already, just open up your phones, scan that QR code that you see there, and you'll get taken to a live poll. And what we want to know is what you think about when you hear the word lead scoring. And you can participate as many times as you want. So you can start to enter your response and hit submit. And if other things start to come to mind, hit those as well. And as we start to see some results come in, Emily is going to go ahead and share her screen, and we're going to start to see what everybody is thinking. And so if you start to see words that you see on the screen that resonate with you, feel free to type those in as well, because what we're going to get then is, amazing, a really great sort of visual of where people's minds are at. So Dee, I'll pass back to you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Leah. Really appreciate it. I think this is fantastic. So we're starting to get a little bit of our mini community here for the next hour, thoughts on what lead scoring means to you. And we can certainly see, I'm sure you guys have seen this before, like the words that are coming up more often are going to be larger. So we're seeing leads, MQLs, quality, marketing, prospects, as some of the words that are coming up. I see complicated, collaborative, opportunity. This is fantastic. Fantastic. I think these are really right on in terms of some of the concepts that we're going to be looking to explore today in our conversation around signals and lead scoring. So I think this is awesome. I'm seeing, again, still quality seems to be the main concept here, and I love how obviously it's coming up much more frequently, right? So I love that, because I feel like that oftentimes is the challenge that most companies are trying to solve when looking at lead scoring. And it's also very frequently a challenge that's not completely addressed after implementation. So I'm sure there's going to be some good discussion here that's going to follow. All right, so moving on, I think that was a really good kind of exercise to get us all going. So let's actually now start the conversation. So I'll turn to our guest speakers to really kind of get the conversation going here. And I think one of the big questions that we've been pushing as part of this conversation is to really start with, I feel like, a question that's not asked enough, which is about, is lead scoring worth sales' time? And and if you're wondering why, I feel like that's an important question, because oftentimes lead scoring is done kind of entirely on the marketing side without really involving sales, or if we do try to involve sales, I've found sometimes there's not a lot of willingness to participate, or it's not like, let's just do that, or like, what do you need from us? We'll just give it to you and move on. So Jody, give us your perspective on kind of how do you see lead scoring from a sales perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there's so many advancements that marketing's made, and this might shock some of the crowd, may even get some opinionated salespeople that may disagree with me here, but in my opinion, sales is really dictated by a quota, and I feel like most salespeople are underneath that pressure of that quota. And really what they're looking for is an opportunity score versus a lead score. I really don't think that lead scoring is something that really is that meets their radar. Again, I think it depends on the size of the company and those kinds of things. But for the most part, I think sales is more interested in, give me somebody that has some pain that I can solve. And I don't know if that score is going to drive it home enough for them. So.
Love it. Love it. Well said. Well said. No, this is great. See, I feel like this is the kind of feedback the kind of question that's not asked often enough, and the kind of feedback that's not always forthcoming. So I love that perspective. Nadia, what is your, kind of like going to the other side of the corner here, what has your kind of experience been with lead scoring? And do you think lead scoring is relevant today?
Yeah, no, fair enough. Like I hear you, Jody, like sales wants opportunities, and I 100% agree with that. I've seen that, and every marketer is there to create those opportunities. But I will say that it is a process, right? So from a marketing perspective, it starts with like your MCL, goes into your MQL, and then your SAL, et cetera. So to get there, you do need to start at the beginning, and it's understanding how are we going to get there. So sometimes it's working backwards from a lead scoring perspective. It's understanding like your total revenue, what are you trying to achieve? And then figuring out together, what does that opportunity look like? What are those pain points that we're trying to solve? And how do we get customers with those pain points? So So yes, the revenue is important. Yes, the opportunities are definitely important. But from a marketing perspective, we have to understand how are we going to generate those leads? And it is a process. And it starts with quantity. And I did see one of the words that were a part of the graph was quality, right? So that is the important thing. It's not really about the quantity of the leads. It's going to be about the quality, and that the lead scoring is what should help you get to the quality.
Love it. Love it. All right. This is great. I feel like we're really kind of getting going here. Okay. So let's jump to another question that I feel is actually not asked often enough. In my experience, what I've seen, there's a challenge, there's a pain. Lead scoring is identified as a solution. Lead scoring is implemented, and then it's like we move on. And if very rarely, I feel like, is the question asked, is this really working? Especially in the first, let's say, 3 to 6 months. It's usually like a year or two later, someone's asking, is this really working? Do we need it? Should we update it? So I'd really love to know. And again, Nadia, maybe this time I'll start with your perspective. And as we're kind of getting going here, please, everyone, again, if anything here stimulates your thoughts, or if you have other ideas or other questions you'd like to tackle, type them into chat. We'd love to explore them. Or if you want to, you can also send it as a direct message to Emily or Leah as well. If you don't, if it's something that you really kind of want to just maybe ask privately. So, but back to you, Nadia. I'd love to kind of get your perspective here. How do you know if the lead scoring is working? What do you look for?
Right. So marketers on the call, I don't know if there's many marketers, if you're there, raise your hand. But really, as B2B marketers, yeah, great. It's important for us to generate revenue. So no longer, and gone are the days where it's all about sessions and website traffic and number of leads. It's really about what are the leads that are driving the opportunities and the revenue within the organization. And if you can't answer that question, you're in trouble. So how do you do that? It's really understanding, like, each stage, how is it performing? What are the percentages that are happening, and quantifying those at each stage. And when there's gaps, like if there's something that's stuck, for example, at SAL, and that percentage is decreasing over time, then it's really important to understand how do we fix that, and how do we move those leads across the life cycle. So you'll know when it's not working, when we're not creating the opportunities, when we're not creating the revenue impact and the pipeline that's required for the business. And if we're not, it's really back to how are we quantifying our leads? Like what is a lead to us? And working on that organizationally, on how do we get the leads that we need to get to the revenue number
that we need. Yes. I love it. Jody, what's kind of what's your take on that? How would you, in sales, again, because you probably are not, again, in sales, you even said it, like, this is not necessarily something that's relevant to you. So if you're working within an organization that has deployed lead scoring, and maybe ideally they've engaged you, they've told you, hey, we're doing this, it's you might see something. How do you evaluate whether it's working or not? Or even, let's say they come to you a little bit later and say, hey, is this working? Is it better than it was before?
Yeah. Well, I think that looking at the historical information that you have available to you certainly is where you start. But I would be looking for trends for, like, if you've got low scored leads converting in your pipeline, then why is that? And I would say you probably need to make some adjustments there, because those are the ones that you want to say, why is this one an outlier, or is it an outlier? If you've got an equal balance of low scored leads closing in your pipeline, as many as you do high scored leads, then your lead scoring is really not doing its part. You should see high scored leads be the ones that are converting. And if you see a handful of low scored leads convert, then your lead scoring process is really working for you. But you can tell if it's not, if you're closing as many low score leads as you are high ones. So that's what I would be looking for, is to see what the story's telling us. So
love it. So essentially what you're saying is that the best way to evaluate whether lead scoring is working or not is to look at the outcomes, right? So are these the high scoring leads converting, and are the low scoring leads becoming essentially rejected? And if that's the case, then it most likely is working. If it's the opposite is happening or something similar to it, then we probably should be looking at lead scoring because something's going awry, right? If high score leads are being rejected and low score leads are converting, then obviously the scoring is not really all that effective, right? Awesome.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where my head goes, is just, where's the revenue coming from and where are my deals coming from? Because obviously salespeople want to make their job easier. They're open to that. And I think that sometimes it's hard to get that buy-in because it's a process, like Nadia said, there's a process that needs to take place, and so if I'm a salesperson and you want me to buy in and I see, well, I closed this deal and it was a low scored lead, help me understand this, because now I don't, I can't depend on the data that I'm getting. And so, I think that's where, once you dial that in, and I think sales can get really excited about that at that point, because then when they see a lead that comes in with a high score, they know their probability is higher to close it. So.
I love it. I love it. And I'll just throw out this teaser because I feel like you just hit on something here, is that towards the end of the session, we're going to get into one of the takeaways, which is actually a lead scoring dashboard. And I feel like, because it was developed working with both Jody and Nadia, and I feel like we've kind of incorporated some of these ideas already in that takeaway. So amazing. So stick around. We'll be sharing that in a little while, but I think at this point, maybe it's a good chance to turn to chat and see what's kind of coming around. I think we got we may have gotten some questions, so I will. Leah, what's the chat looking like?
Well, we don't have any questions that have come in on chat just now, but I know that before the forum, Carol did send us a question that she was wondering about. So Carol, I'm wondering if you're willing to unmute yourself and come on mic and share your question.
Yes, hi everybody. My question was around, especially when we're talking about large enterprise businesses, how do you keep your lead scoring under control and not become a giant monstrosity when you're having to deal with scoring on different types of products or scoring on different types of lines of businesses? Like, how do you manage complex scoring programs when, the point of a score is to be able to surface up really good quality leads, but the definition of a really good quality lead may be different depending on the line of business or the product that you're dealing with. How do you manage that? I guess that's more of a marketing question. How do you manage the expectations on the sales side, but also how do you manage it in your platforms?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. So I've worked in different size companies. I've worked across a bunch of different verticals, e-com, SaaS, tech. And honestly, I feel like simplicity is the key. And it's hard because in certain industries, it does require some complexity, but I find that like where we created complexity, it really degraded the ability to create the leads and the opportunities that were required for the business. And when we've really scaled down the lead scoring opportunity or the lead scoring models, I found that was really helpful and beneficial for the organization. So there's a lot of like really great software too that's come up or has come around the last specifically even 5 years. It helps even with like more intent-based kind of data. So I find that, like, for example, I'm going to give a shout out to Clearbit. Clearbit has really saved our life, the organization that I've been in recently, where we start to understand, like, are these leads real? What's the intent data behind these? And just keeping it really simple. So identifying like, what are those intent-based behaviors? Like, have they, is this customer or lead, more lead, have they attended a webinar? Have they downloaded an ebook? And then, and that's very, very basic, but what also is the demographic? So are they in the ICP that we need? So this is a long-winded answer, but really it's about simplicity. And I find that's been helpful for my marketing teams that I've led in the past.
Amazing. Thank you, Nadia. I'll add to that. In my experience, it's interesting because it doesn't. I would argue it actually doesn't matter whether you have a single division, you're a smaller company, you have a single product, single division, or you're a large enterprise with dozens of divisions and perhaps hundreds of products. What ultimately you got to be looking for is who is buying, right? You're looking for that customer profile by division, by product, or by line of product. And that's what you're trying to create the score for. And when again, I love what Nadia said. I could not agree more. Keep it simple. You create the score to prioritize, and essentially that score will prioritize the leads for that division, that product line. And then you will send over those prioritized leads to sales. In my opinion, you don't show, I think this is actually really important. We found time and time again, don't show the score to sales. Just sort the leads that you're sending in, like the highest score should be at the top, the lowest score should be on the bottom of the ones that qualify, but do not show the scores, because it undermines, like if they see, the score is 100 because we think it's perfect, or our lead scoring think it's perfect, but really they talk to the person like, okay, that was terrible. It'll happen. It will always happen. You just undermined the trust of the sales team in your scoring. And with that, actually, I'd love to kind of get Jody's perspective on that. I mean, again, Jody, I know you kind of been in various types of environments, right? Sales environments with different organizations working with marketing and sales. Have you seen, again, this may not have been very relevant, but I'd love to get your thoughts around, have you seen companies where there was scoring? If so, did they show the score? And if so, did they have a negative or a positive potential impact seeing that score, right?
Mhm.
What's your thought on that?
Yeah.
Jody?
So yeah, I appreciate that. I'd like to also kind of just give a little bit of color on the last question as well. So like, first of all, I 100% agree with what Nadia is saying in terms of keeping things simple, but I would also say with an enterprise strategy, introducing a layer of sales, and those sales functions can be different responsibilities, and not to, if my logo isn't promoting ProspectHunter, I would say that, we've seen a lot of different layers of how sales can play in that process, and so, introducing a sales function to a marketing activity and having a demand generation approach earlier, keep it simple and score the leads, and then modify the types of questions to advance that opportunity to a next level, whatever that next level might be. It might be a nurture sequence. It might be, an introduction to sales, and you have to kind of draw that line. But to, back to your question, Z, just in terms of, should you show a score? I think that that's a very interesting question. You're obviously going to get preconceived notions from sales, and if you have any, I think you also need to incorporate lots of personality assessments, dispositions in terms of sales and who's actually seeing that score. Yeah, I do think you should for sure be selective with who gets that, because certain people will they go in with a certain type of energy, the cream is going to rise to the top, and there's just certain sales dispositions and certain people that are going to make, they're Rumpelstiltskin. They'll turn anything into gold. You know what I mean? And then you have other people that just they kind of create, they're process driven salespeople, and they all have their benefits, but certain personality dispositions, if they see a certain score, they may not put the kind of energy that you need to see behind it. And that's absolutely true. So
fair.
Yeah, I don't really think the actual score, truly, the actual number itself matters. It really is this thing. It's subjective, right? And every score is going to be different at every organization. I just think it's really important for the sales team to understand, okay, this is an opportunity that's come up, or a lead, and depending on if you have a BDR team, et cetera. So it's just understanding what is this an actual defined opportunity, or a lead that we think will be interesting to sales. But I feel the number itself is not anything that is really exciting for the sales team. Like they want to know, is this something that I need to pursue or not? And as a marketing team, it's really important to just keep checking as well, because I find that like sometimes leads will be an A fit lead, but then for some reason, like a B fit lead might be scored as a C. And then you kind of have to like double check like what's actually happening. Things break all the time. There's system errors, like things aren't connected. And so it's just really important to keep like checking and making sure that, yes, this lead scoring model is working, but I really don't think the number actually matters to sales. And because they're like, I don't care if this is 100, 200, do I need to call them? That's really like what sales.
Yeah, they still have to do their job. So, I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
But I mean, I think also like after you've maybe, one compromise might be once you, certainly if you haven't dialed it in, don't show it, you know what I mean? But like, if you've got a really confident lead scoring program that's really working, then, do you, the flip side of that is if you show that, then, and you still want these other leads worked, sales is going to drift towards where the meat is. They're going to vulture it. They're going to they're going to be the first to kind of get there. And they are a lot like animals. It's really silly how salespeople can really, they'll kind of nibble at a lead first to see if they like it. Our clients do this all the time. Do we like the leads we're getting? And then, oh, we do like these leads. Give us more. And it's like, so anyways, I guess that's my 10 cents.
No, I love that. This is a really good conversation. And I think I love it. I think so. Again, I feel like the sales perspective is so often missing in these conversations. So Jody, I really appreciate that, because I found the same thing. It goes back to what you said, Jody, at the very beginning of this conversation, is that ultimately it's so important for marketing to understand that sales is compensated based on performance. And so and performance is directly correlated to time spent. And so sales is always very critical about where they're spending their time, because time is literally money to sales. So I got to focus. Again, it's the same thing. If I'm getting a bunch of high scored leads, then I'm going to go there first, because hey, it's probably going to be a higher chance that they'll convert, therefore higher chance for me to meet my targets. So, okay, awesome. I feel like we're really getting going here. Carol, thank you so much for the question. That was a fantastic one. I think there's as we're kind of now getting going, I'd love to kind of get another poll going here. Let's kind of look at, do you have lead scoring currently implemented in your company? I do feel like this is always kind of a good one to kind of feel out where people are in the process. So have you already implemented it? Is it working? If you haven't implemented, are you thinking about it, or is it maybe completely irrelevant to you? So we'll just start with a yes or no, but all these other questions, feel free to answer them in the chat.
And then Z, while we're waiting for folks to finish the survey there and the poll that came up, I did have another question come in that was just a direct message to me. And that question was, how do you decide what actions hold a higher value in your scoring? So I know we've been chatting a lot about sort of whether you show the score or not, but what about how are you deciding what actions hold a higher value when it comes to scoring?
All right, now we're getting to the toughie.
One. Yeah, I could get that tough one. So I think it's testing a little bit. So a couple of things. One is like, we talked a little bit about like lead scoring happening in a vacuum. So the last thing you want to do as a marketing team to make this successful is like just doing this by yourself and by yourself, like in a bubble with the marketing team. So it's super important to understand a few things. One is like your ICP. What is your ideal customer? What's the ideal customer profile within your organization? And that starts like, doesn't matter what stage you are. I mean, it's harder when you're like really early, but because you're probably in like product market fit discovery, but it's understanding like who that customer is, what are their pain points, what are their behavior, what's the behavioral data that's associated with that customer, the firmographic, is it large, is it mid, is it small? And then it's understanding the pain points and then the behavior around the customer and developing that lead scoring model because of that behavior. How does that happen? How do you understand your customer? I mean, that could be another webinar, but it's really about like quantitative, qualitative data. At Proposify, where I work, we do a lot of qualitative data, speaking to our customers, understanding what their pain points are. And then it's also talking to sales. So I wouldn't forget sales team in this, Jody. So it's really discussing like what are you encountering when you're prospecting your customers? Like, what are the pain points or that you're having? What are some of the things that you're running issues that you're running into? So once you start to understand that, then it's easier to start putting together a lead scoring model that actually is successful, because you understand how they behave, what their intent signals are. You understand if you're going to be focusing on mid to large. Like if you are SMB, or let's just say you're large enterprise with your current company, that's who you're targeting. Your sales team is not going to want to talk to like the mid companies. So if you're sending them mid and they're only interested in large to enterprise, that's a problem. So those are kind of all the factors that need to be assessed when developing it. So there's those two criteria: understanding your customer, or three criteria: speaking to sales and collaborating with them, but also not doing it in a vacuum. Like the worst thing you can do is just have assumptions about all of this as a marketing team and start playing around with it. But it will never be perfect at first. So it's just important to test it and then modify as needed. That was
awesome.
Answer.
No, this is
For
fantastic,
everyone.
Nadia. So I feel like I could really jump in here, but let's kind of take a pause here. I think the poll results are probably ready. Let's kind of get a pulse on where people are. All right, pretty cool. So I think you should be seeing the results of the poll. So we have 60% of folks have lead scoring in place at their company, 40% do not. So it's almost 50-50. That's very interesting. So again, this is great, great to see. I'd love to chime in on this question as well. I think the key is, and I love it, where we start is we do start by talking to sales, and if impossible and practical, we'll also do a simple or complex, depending on the situation, analysis of opportunity analysis to really get an understanding of what's actually converting. So I feel like that's always, because again, there's always assumption by everyone involved around what's a good and ideal prospect profile, which again, there's nothing quite like data. So looking at those opportunities and looking at the profile of the contact associated, or even account demographics of the accounts associated with the opportunities, especially the ones that are converting it to revenue, is a great place to start. But I love to just literally go talk to sales. And what my favorite question to ask, and this is how I love it, and Jody, I'd love to get your take on this as well, but where I love to start, because again, the reality is sales is busy. So you need to have at best, they'll give you 20 minutes. You got to make those 20 minutes count. The one question that I find is the best place to get started is that it's end of the day. I used to say it's 5 p.m. and then a number of salespeople told me we don't stop at 5 or 6, right? We're kind of around the clock. Fair enough. So, but it's the end of the day. You got time for one more thing, and you look at your queue, and there's 3 leads there. And so, but you can only make one call. And again, what do salespeople do? They focus in on what's the highest likelihood this is going to convert. So I always ask, okay, you have 3 leads, 1 call that you can make. 1 engagement you can do. What do you look for in those 3 leads to determine which one you're going to call? And I find that really focuses the conversation on what's really important. Again, remember, your salespeople are making calls every day. They know what they're looking for. They know what converts. Jody, I'd love to, again, I feel like, I already heard you say, well, this is good. So yeah, tell me what you're thinking.
I go back to a piece of content that I actually created before I was kind of, and I was in more of a sales development role, and the company kind of put it out there, like, what's your piece of content that you would create? And I worked on a piece, and I thought it was brilliant. And, it was the best days and times for sales prospecting. And I did a bunch of research. I pulled a bunch of information, and I thought, this is brilliant, and it performed amazing. Lots of downloads. It was a great piece of content, still performs really well. But none of those leads are going to convert, because the people that are downloading that content are SDRs. They want to know
when to call,
what the best days and times for prospecting is, but the person that's not, or the person that would download that, like if Nadia downloaded that, she's not downloading that for the purposes to give a buying signal that she wants to purchase outsourced prospecting. That's not the purpose of why she would download that. She would download that piece of content because, and so you would associate a score to that because of the content download. And so that would get some type of score. And so I think going back to the persona of the actual person and what their pain is, what's the pain that you're trying to solve, and how do you create a piece of content that gives you some sort of trigger that would give you the highest score possible of what that content was, and what are these series of activities that are going to really give me an idea that there's some pain. What's the pain that an action that they can take online, an action that they can take with our brand when they interact with our brand? What is that action that they're taking that says they've got a problem? Hey, you downloaded best days and times for prospecting. Do you need an outsourced salesperson?
Gotcha.
You need an SDR?
Gotcha. So what
No,
I'm hearing
I just want to know what time to call people. So
right. What I'm hearing you say, this is actually really interesting, because I feel like now you're also getting, because I feel like I was focusing a little bit more on the demographics of the person, but I feel like you're also getting into that digital body language, the engagement, right? What are they looking at? What are they consuming? And I love that perspective, because I do think it's important. A lot of folks, when they're scoring, they're looking at any activity. Did they visit our website in the last 90 days? I mean, they could have visited your homepage and it's going to score. It doesn't really mean that they're interested in buying. So I really feel like you're nailing in. Maybe, Nadia, I just want to see if you have any perspectives on kind of how do you score engagement or content as part of the score, and then we'll move on. I think there's other questions, and again, we want to kind of keep this conversation moving. There's lots of topics we can cover within this bigger umbrella.
Yeah, I'll share just like how we're scoring that today. So we have like the intent and like the firmographics scoring. So like high intent is like demo request, or they've been in free trials. So that's like big, like they've demo requested, like big intent. The mid for us is like webinars, ebooks. We have like many ebooks. So like that's the thing with content. Like we have many different types of content and different stages of like, that sounds the buying cycle. Like I know it's like the jargon, like different stages of the buying cycle. But we have like a lot of content, and then we're consistently testing and iterating on that stuff. And then if they've asked to request to contact sales, we actually consider that as mid. And then low is like blog sign up, lead magnets, newsletter signups, kind of like kind of everything else that they're doing, kind of, and website visitor would be a part of like the low actually for us. So and it took like an evolution to get there. So it's like we kind of we rearranged these and had different types of criteria, but this is what we found works in terms of like those intent signals. So it's really about, like what's right for your business. And it's never the same. I find that at any business I worked at, like there's different criteria that will score higher and lower, but I just find like website visitors is just like very low. And I feel like,
right.
If that's like the high intent signal at your company, then I think you need to like, probably rework some stuff.
Okay, awesome. No, this is great. So we'll move on. I think there's a lot of other topics here that we can, again, kind of address within this larger umbrella. The one thing, actually, I was just kind of thinking back to the poll. So if you're here in the audience and you're one of the 40% that don't have lead scoring, you may not have it because it doesn't apply in your company. Totally fair. The two things I usually look for to determine whether lead scoring might be worth looking at is, are your sales reps following up on your leads, on the leads that marketing is generating? If they're not, and this is actually pretty common,
they're fired. I'm just kidding.
Well, ultimately, what's interesting, Jody, they won't necessarily be, because in a lot of organizations,
right,
they're not following up on those leads because they found they're low quality and they're wasting their time. And so, but for a sales rep, no one really cares as long as they're meeting the quota. No one cares. I mean, you tell them
they hit their quota. You're right. They're not going anywhere. But
it's all about the quota. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you can.
Yeah, they should just follow up with the leads. I feel like that we can't really serve marketing the way that it needs to. Sorry to interrupt you, Z. I was just saying, I feel like they we can't truly, marketing can't do their job if we're not giving them feedback to that point, is all I was saying. Sorry.
True. So I think that exactly, I feel like that's the other piece here, is that if the way you look at whether lead scoring might be relevant in your organization is you look at, is sales following up on leads that you're generating, and maybe that's even as simple as that. Are they following up on leads that you generate? Like Jody just said, you should be. But I personally find, my experience in a lot of organizations, that's actually not happening. And again, if you talk to sales, what they'll say is that those leads are crap. I mean, we even find enough, I think in the previous one, we even kind of talked about this a little bit, about this perception that's in a lot of organizations, sales has of marketing leads. And again, it's not false, because because in many organizations, marketing is still playing to some of the older methodologies of lead creation, where if you came to stop by the booth, you're a lead. And again, you talk to any sales rep and they're going to say, yeah, we had 200 people stop by the booth. The reality is 90% of them are not interested. They're just stopped by for a tchotchke, or they wanted to have learn something, but they're not actually in the buying stages yet. So I do think that's an important thing to look at, but I'll move on here.
Can I just hit on one point?
Please.
So it's been said a couple of times, and I want to clarify a difference. So it's different speaking to each individual sales rep, like at separate times, to try to figure this out. And it's different to have everybody in a virtual room, or in a room if you're in the office.
I love it. Yes.
Because it's absolutely like mind blowing to get everyone's perspective of what the pain points are, and what a good lead is, and what a good prospect is, because it's going to be different across the board. So it's really important to get everybody into like a internal workshop to like figure that out. Because if you speak to like your CRO or your VP of sales or an AE or a BDR, the CEO even, you'll get a different answer from everyone, 100%. So it's important to like have a collaborative conversation in that exercise. If you haven't started lead scoring and you're thinking about starting lead scoring because you have like a bunch of leads, you have product market fit, but you want to understand how to get better leads, I feel like that's when you start to think about having a lead scoring model or implementing lead scoring. But have a collaborative workshop, like use like a Figma board or something like that, where you can start to see how people are interpreting what that is, because everyone's going to have a different answer.
I completely agree. And see, and in my experience in doing this, I always when we meet with sales reps, it's one-on-one. We identify the top 2 or 3 reps, or we bring in their manager who might have insights, and we do the conversations one-on-one, because the challenge is you get more than one person in a room, and you're going to get someone who's louder, you're going to get someone who's quieter, and the person that's louder will dominate the conversation. Everybody else will kind of nod. You're not going to get the insights that you get from one-on-one. So I would say it's better to actually have fewer people, but you do one-on-ones and you really probe and you get in what do they think. And then if you can combine that with the actual opportunity data analysis, I think you're going to be in a much better position. So cool.
I'm gonna jump in here, Z, because I
please.
know we're getting up to the time, and I've had a couple questions come in, and they all relate to this excellent conversation that's happening right now. So I'm going to fire 2 of them at you. The first one is just someone asked, really curious if for large enterprises, have you ever seen scoring tied to the content type, where scoring is simplified and based solely on the types of contents a lead engaged? So I know you already talked about sort of websites not being super high, but if it's white paper or case study or blog or webinar, like, have you ever seen it where it's just simplified against that? And then the second part of that is a different quiz. Oh, okay. I was just gonna like throw them both out there, because I think the other part that relates to what Nadia was saying around getting people in a room, besides who you're talking to, another question came in around, what about stage of company? And is lead scoring more or less relevant depending on what stage of the company, what stage your company is at? So kind of throwing those both out there for you to chat
if we
about.
take the stage company one, except for me, that's an easy answer. It's like, yeah, stage of company is 100% like relative to like lead scoring and whether you require it or not. So like if you're early stage, you're probably not going to need that, because you're not going to have a lot of leads at that point. I would even say like probably 0 to like 5 million stage, you may or may not need it. But I feel like as you start growing to 5 to 10 and 10 beyond, it is something that you you probably will need. Specifically, also the other factor, I think the other variable will also be like how many of your opportunities or your leads are coming from inbound versus outbound. Are you sales led? Are you product led? Like all those things play into whether or not you need a lead scoring model and what that lead scoring model looks like. Because if you're product led, then all of a sudden we're talking about PQLs. And if you're sales led, then you might be looking at, LinkedIn qualified leads. So I feel like the stage and the type of industry that you're in, or a stage company will matter.
I couldn't agree more. I think that was really well said. I'm just going to go to the first question because you already answered the second one. Yeah, in my view, you can certainly do that. I generally find that it goes back to even what Jody was saying earlier, right? Because Jody spoke a little bit about this around identifying the content that actually matters to your audience. And if you can really, again, like, when he talked about having the best time of day to call, and that really the people are going to be looking for that are the people who are calling, who, unless you're selling to those people, that's probably not worthwhile making as determine whether you qualify a lead or not. So I think it can work. I think, but you really, if you're going to use essentially just content or specific pieces of content, I think you just have to be really dialed in that this piece of content is tied to a very like ICP as now, and to maybe even a specific action for your ideal customer in a stage. So when they consume this piece of content, that's a really good indicator that they're moving from one stage of the buying cycle to another. Now we want to hit them. Now we can score them, and now it's going to work. And then actually, that it makes perfect sense. So
yeah, I would also just say maybe don't give up on the piece of like do the due diligence to create the right piece of content. Make sure that it's engaging. Make sure that you're positioning yourself as the thought leader for that particular thing. And then give it the due diligence to test it out and make sure that it's not performing. But people consume really good content and they come back for more. They want it. We all do. Everybody in this room, when they see a good piece of content, downloads it, saves it, and shows it to other people. And so anyways, sorry, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I love it. No, because we're all ultimately, because we're all looking for information. I think that's what content is. It's information. So if information is helpful, we're going to go back to that source, which again, to me, is the whole story behind the power of content marketing. And if you're doing it well, it's gonna drive results. The doing it well is the challenge, and that's where
it's really hard. Yeah,
most companies do. Even if they're trying, they're not actually succeeding, but it is the trying that's important. Leah, how are the questions looking? Are there is there anything else in the queue, or maybe something that's important for us to tackle?
Well, I'm just looking at the time, so I want to make sure that we're mindful of everyone's time. We did have, I just was commenting to Nadia that when she started talking about all the different kinds of leads, that there's potentially a conversation we could have around moving beyond, the SALs, the SQLs, the MQLs, and talking about some of the other ones that have come in. So that's maybe something we could just touch on quickly before we wrap.
I'd love that. Thank you, Leah. I think that's a great cue, because I've heard Nadia mention MCL,
LQLs,
and then LQLs. Yeah, I'd love, again, maybe we kind of go again.
PQLs, LQLs,
go ahead, Jody.
CQLs.
Yeah, give us some definitions. Just kind of rapid fire. What are some of the definitions? Again, this may or may not be applicable to some of the audience members, but I do think it's important. I love the fact that we're expanding the conversation beyond just the few that we're all familiar with.
Right. Well, LQL, marketing qualified lead. Marketing has set some parameters that says they've engaged with the brand, and marketing approves this lead. Sales qualified lead is where sales has given some effort towards qualifying that opportunity in terms of questions, and they've an accepted lead, sales accepted lead and sales qualified lead is really confusing to a lot of organizations, and it's really going to depend on the size of the organization, as to whether or not you use that terminology, because and if it
Totally.
makes sense for your processes.
What
LQL, I
about
like it when it-
LQL? Yeah, tell us
Yeah.
about LQL, because that I'll be honest, that is actually like I think you and I were chatting about this, and you mentioned it. I'm like, I've never heard of that. Tell us about
Yeah.
LQL.
Well, I love that Nadia mentioned that, because I thought I made that up at one point with, because sometimes you make them up and you're like, yeah, it makes sense, LQL, and it's like, because LinkedIn has its own, it's a social media tool, but it's for business. You know what I mean? It's not like your social, and some people use it for kind of both, and there's people that get offended by that. But the way that someone engages, the persona that engages with more people, it's typically kind of more of an extroverted person. It's not like somebody, unless somebody has a really good hook and you connect and pitch, which is a sin, and you don't want to do that. You know what I mean?
But when we look at an LQ, what is an LQL to you?
It's a LinkedIn qualified lead. I'm sorry.
How do you
qualified
qualify? This is to me what's kind of interesting. Is it just a lead that's coming from LinkedIn, or is there something specific about the qualification?
Well, yes,
criteria?
that's a good question. And again, I think you need to draw that, some people use that as a place to start the buyer's journey with somebody, and they need a lot. We've determined that they need a lot of other types of activities to really deem that really more marketing qualified. Even I put LinkedIn qualified lead kind of below an MQL even at some point. But again, it depends on your activities.
Awesome. Awesome. No, this is great.
What I wanted to throw out there before we pass the mic is CQL. And the reason why I want to throw that out there is because I think that conversation is important in a marketing and a sales process. And a conversation qualified lead might not fit into a sales qualified typical bucket, but a conversation that's taken place and it has been qualified based off of questions has its value in the sales process. And
I love that.
I'll turn it
No,
over
this
to
is
Nadia.
great. So basically what you're saying then, the conversation qualified lead would be a stage in my book between an SAL and an SQL, right? So you accepted them, you talked to them. Right. Okay, cool. Yeah. Now, Nadia, you mentioned, we got to kind of keep this moving now. I apologize. We're kind of coming to the end of the hour, and we want to talk a little bit about the takeaway and kind of that lead scoring dashboard. So if you are thinking about lead scoring, what are the things you should be thinking about? But before we go there, you mentioned an MCL, and it almost sounded to me like that's before an MQL. What is an MCL to you?
Yeah, so it's like a total number of leads. Like it could be like everything that we've been able to get, but the MQL is like having some qualifying parameters around that. So it's like the first stage of your marketing lead.
I love it. I love it. So that can become another, and it's funny because actually this ties really well to the lead scoring dashboard, because one of the criteria we're scoring on, or we recommend looking at in the dashboard, is the conversion criteria between stages. So this could actually even become like this whole idea, the conversion between an MCL and an MQL. So how many of the folks that you have in your, like you said, all of the MCLs, all the folks that you have access to in your database, how many of those are actually you're converting on any particular month, for example, or quarter. Okay. So I love that. I love that. Cool. So let's actually, if you, Leah, if you don't mind, or if we can share the takeaway, and let's spend a few minutes talking about, as we wrap up here, the dashboard. So again, we've kind of spent a little bit of time talking about trying to summarize some of our experience into an easy takeaway as you're looking to maybe improve your existing scoring, maybe even considering whether lead scoring is going to be relevant to you. This dashboard could be a handy guide. And because what it's going to do, it's going to essentially quickly outline for you, hey, here's the things you should, if you do look at deploying lead scoring, here's the things that you should be looking at and thinking about. So number one are you scoring every single lead? And this is actually really simple, and I find most organizations don't do it because the assumption is once we deploy lead scoring, everyone assumes everything's being scored. That's not always the case. So I think even looking at, are we scoring all leads or just some, is a good kind of a litmus test for whether your scoring is actually working, kind of at a very basic layer. And I feel like we kind of, number two is what we've kind of touched on a little bit. I feel like Jody touched on it, Nadia touched on it. So the main question you should be asking yourself around, is my lead scoring working? you look at the convert. So number 2 there, you look at the conversion ratios between stages. So if your MQL, so again, in theory, your MQL should be the highly scored leads. If they're converting into SALs, that means the sales rep looked at them and said, I want to call this person. That's actually a good initial, again, kind of a litmus test for whether it's working around, is our sales reps actually willing to call them? Because if you get sending MQLs over and no one's looking at them, or sales reps are discarding them, that probably means there's something wrong. So that's, I think, important to look at what reports you should generate. So we kind of try to outline a few. Again, the idea of funnel stage conversions, a data completeness, and the insight and patterns can be really helpful to look at, is my scoring working? And again, I would say, even if you've currently deployed, this is very relevant. If you're thinking about deploying it, I can't say this enough. In the first 3 or 6 months after deploying is when you really want to be looking at. And that leads me to number 4 here. How often should I review my lead scoring? So again, I think this is so important. It doesn't take that much time. What you want to do in the first quarter after you deploy it, you want to review the rejects and accepts weekly. And this assumes, like we were discussing in our previous live forum, you want to basically, the sales needs to agree to follow up on every lead. That goes without saying. If they don't do that, then there's actually dubious value in doing this. And you adjust after 3 months, you basically review monthly and you adjust quarterly. So you kind of obviously once you kind of go through that initial one, and then obviously the question always comes up, I don't have time for this. How much time is this going to take? It actually doesn't really take that much time. We do this quite often for our clients when we deploy lead scoring. And honestly, it's 15 to 30 minutes per week. And you can quickly scan through the leads that were sent, how many were accepted, how many were rejected. And then again, if you need to make adjustments, usually the adjustments will be minor. It's about 60 or 120 minutes. Most scoring is done in MA platforms, your Pardots, your Marketos, your Eloquas, and your HubSpots. And usually you're talking dials. So if something's not quite there and you're seeing it, when you're reviewing, you can usually just adjust the dial based on the criteria, that the patterns that you're seeing, and you save and you examine the patterns again next week and next month, and you look to improve it over time, because it's never, regardless of what you think it's going to be, it's never perfect in the beginning. So I think on that note, we'll kind of need to wrap up here. I would love to actually throw this over to Nadia and Jody, but I think I feel like, we kind of get going. There's so much to say. This topic is actually, while simple at the front, is actually quite deep and complex, and everything that goes through. And I feel like, a lot of the conversation that came out and perspectives that Nadia and Jody shared really kind of illustrate the depth that you kind of go in as you really start looking at how you make your lead scoring successful. So I will pause here, make sure we end on time. I'm sure everyone has either lunch or other meetings. So thank you all for your participation and frank questions at today's session. Nadia, I can't thank you enough for participating. Jody, same there. You guys, feel like you guys really enriched it. Yeah, go ahead, Jody.
Oh no, I was just saying thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, Nadia. This was great.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And if you want to reach out to me, if you've been listening on the call and you just have some more deep questions, I'm happy to answer. Just find me on LinkedIn, Nadia Milani.
Amazing.
Thank you, guys.
Love it. Love it. So before we go, I think we still have about 2 more minutes. I'm going to ask you, please take just 20 seconds and give us feedback around what worked for you in this forum, what didn't work for you, what you like, what you didn't like. This is actually our second one. We've kind of been running them quarterly so far, but we'd love to. The conversation has been great. We're going to look to accelerate and hold these monthly. So, but again, we want to make sure that they're adding value. So if you feel like we haven't addressed something, share it with us. You should see a satisfaction poll. Tell us what you're thinking. Tell us how we can do better, and we'll certainly try to do better next time. On that note, again, thank you everyone for your time. Have a lovely Tuesday, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.